It was a year of regression for one Reilly Smith. Hunter and I are going to take a look back on his season right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And we thank you for making this your first listener watch of the day, because we're your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. So let's get right into it, Hunter. We are going to look back on the season that Reilly Smith had this season. It was one that we thought was going to be a promising one after he had a very, very solid season in 22-23, coming off a Stanley Cup win with the Vegas Golden Knights, where in the regular season in 78 games, he scored 26 goals and 30 assists for 56 points. But as the Vegas Golden Knights are apt to do, they completely blow up their cap during the season. All of the traditional wisdom be damned. And then they take the offseason to clean it up and get themselves right back into position to become cap compliant, which often means there are casualties off of their roster. This past summer, that casualty was in fact Reilly Smith. He was acquired simply for a third-round pick. He was brought to the Penguins with a lot of promise because he was a pretty big driver in their run to the Stanley Cup in 2023. While his numbers don't jump off the page, he was very solid in that run. 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points in 22 games with the Golden Knights. But then he comes to Pittsburgh and he has a pretty hot start. He looked like he had a lot of chemistry with Evgeni Malkin. The two of them absolutely rocketed out of the gate, coming together and combining for quite a few goals in quite a few really good efforts. But then he dipped down the rest of the season and never really seemed to be able to figure it out. Overall this year, he played 76 games, 13 goals, 27 assists for 40 points. But the biggest thing for me, and we talked about this before we hit record, his biggest problem this year, amongst what were a ton of them, let's be honest, but his shooting percentage greatly regressed this year. In 22-23 with the Vegas Golden Knights, he had a 14.4 shooting percentage. This year, worst of his career at 8.6. So really a deep, deep regression, because not only did that shooting percentage regress that far, he also had a drop-off of 16 points in total, had 56 in his last season with Vegas, and then just 40 this year. So, Hunter, your thoughts on Reilly Smith's year with the Pittsburgh Penguins?
The Penguins quite literally got Reilly Smith's worst season of his career. The only other season that really comes to mind for how bad he was 2014-15, when in 81 games with the Bruins, he had 13 goals, 40 points. So the same exact point output this season, but it was basically about a decade ago. And you're right, shot 8.6% this year. And yes, people, I am a little bit under the weather. I am battling a cold. So if my voice is a bit raspy or whatever, that's why. I've been getting over a cold these last couple of days. But hey, there's no days off here in this business. But I was so excited for this player to come to the Penguins just because I really felt like he was going to help their offense off the rush. I thought he was going to be a great fit for Evgeni Malkin. At the start, it was looking like James Neal. And we said that on the show at the start of the season. It looked like that's what this was going to become throughout the season. Then he just tailed off after the first month. I mean, I was someone who predicted him to score 20, 25, 30 goals this year. I thought he was a perfect Jason Zucker replacement. You paid a third-round pick to get him. I would still make that trade every single day. The cost to acquire really doesn't matter. It's just unfortunate that they didn't get the level of play that they thought they were getting from Smith, or especially the level that I thought they were going to get from Reilly Smith. I mean, his underlings were, I guess, fine this year when he was on the ice, about 1,000 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time, 51.5 shot attempts, 42 goals for, 37 goals against, 484 scoring chances for, 437 against for about almost 53%. And then high danger chances, almost 55% of those for Smith when he was on the ice. So again, his underlyings were fine. He just really couldn't translate those fine underlyings into better results for the season. And I really hate saying this on the show, but it looked like for a lot of games this season, it just looked like he didn't want to be with the Penguins. Just looking at how he was playing, it looked like he would have rather been with Vegas or a different contending team. And I understand the Penguins were really not that good this year, but when I watched him compared to other players, it just didn't seem like he fully was bought in with the Penguins. I'm trying to be careful with how I say it just because I'm sure he obviously cares. Every player on this team cares. Every player in the NHL cares. But it just looked like he would have rather been on a different team this year compared to the Penguins. That's just how I see it, at least. And it just ended up being a disaster of a season for him. It didn't matter what line he was on, whether it was Malkin's line or even the third line. He did have a few decent games with the third line, the ESP line, Eller with Smith and Puustinen. But heading into next season, this is a player that I think you got to try and trade at the draft. If you can get out of that entire contract for the final year, that entire $5 million salary, I think you do it. I'm sure there's going to be at least one or two teams that will come calling and be like, okay, maybe we can get a bounce back year out of him per se. But this is a player that, again, if you can move on just because the experiment didn't work, I think you do it. Just a really miserable year for him overall.
Yeah, it was definitely, putting it mildly, a disappointing year for Reilly Smith, especially considering how well he played with Vegas in his last season. And honestly, how he started with the Penguins. It looked like, I said it on the show, the Erik Karlsson trade was going to get all the headlines, but the Reilly Smith trade, early returns, made it look like that was going to be the better one of the offseason moves. And he's got one more year left at $5 million going into next year. And to your point about him kind of looking like he wasn't fully bought in, maybe not the happiest player, it's understandable. He was one of the original Golden Misfits. He was one of the guys who was taken in the expansion draft when Vegas came into the league, and he really carved out a niche there. He really was one of their main guys. And unfortunately, with the way Vegas operates, that's the cost of doing business with them. You are very expendable when you play for the Vegas Golden Knights because they fully go for it every single season. And we have seen it throughout their entire existence. They are not afraid to move on from guys, no matter how popular, no matter how productive they are, because they want to get better in the immediate and constantly be among the NHL's best. But I also do think if you can trade him this summer, you do it just to get that $5 million off of your books. I keep saying it. One of the most valuable assets in the modern NHL is cap space. But then you look at kind of his career trajectory, the way he's been his entire career. He has pretty much two really good seasons, and then he falls back. And then he has two really good seasons, and then he falls back. Because you look at 2018, 2019, 53 points, 2019, 20 prior to the pandemic, 54 points. And then 2020, 21, the shortened season, 25 points. And then 21, 22, 38 points. Now, the 21, 22 season was hampered a little bit by injury, only played 56 games. But then the next season, the Stanley Cup winning year, 56 points. And then he falls back to 40 this year. So trends indicate that he may not bounce back next year. You also add in the fact, gonna be another year older and a lot of miles on his body, because we have seen Vegas went on a lot of runs with him at the helm. So it's a really, really difficult decision to make. But if I'm Kyle Dubas at the NHL draft, which it's going to be funny this year, it's our first decentralized draft where not everybody's going to be in the building. They're going to have, it's going to be like the NFL draft where everybody's got their war room, everybody's hanging out at their own facility. But you figure Kyle Dubas is going to be working the phones to get some kind of return for Reilly Smith, who you figure with a lot of teams out of it now, a lot of teams trying to take the next step, he could be an enticing piece to offer to those teams.
especially I think to teams in the Western Conference. I think he's just a better fit for some teams over there anyway. For example, a team I keep going back to is the Los Angeles Kings. I think that's a team that still needs some more scoring in their lineup. If they can get the level of Reilly Smith that they saw the year before this one, I think that would make sense for them. And if the Penguins can get some sort of draft capital back, that would be big. And then the Penguins, if they're able to get out of that entire $5 million cap hit, they'll be able to get not even just one player for that cap. They can maybe get two players to come in that can replace his production. That adds you getting closer to 20 million of cap space. It doesn't get you all the way there, but it gets you closer to how much cap space you had heading into last season. So yeah, I agree. If you can find a taker or two for him at the draft, you do it every time, and you look to replace him via means of other players for his production.
For sure. And I briefly mentioned it around the trade deadline. For some reason, general managers will be a little less scared to take him on with just 1 year left rather than a few months and another year, even though that really doesn't make that much of a difference in the whole. But we will see what happens with Reilly Smith this offseason.
And the cap is going up soon, people. So that's going to make it, I think, more enticing for more GMs.
But that'll do it for the Reilly Smith season in review portion of the show. When we come back, well, hockey is completely finished in the Penguins organization as their ECHL affiliate, the Wheeling Nailers, were swept over the weekend. They are out of the Kelly Cup playoffs. We will talk about that game as well as their series and what to look for moving forward. But before we do that, we have to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Policygenius. Life insurance is an important safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and overwhelming. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. I've said it before, I'm at the time in my life when a lot of myself and my friends are looking for life insurance because their families are expanding and they're taking that next step in life. And they have actually said to me that Policygenius, thanks to listening to our show, has helped them out greatly. It was able to get them quick approval, great rates, and much more. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. You can easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work life insurance policy may not offer you enough protection for your family's needs, and even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. All right, we're back here on the Monday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp, joined as always by Hunter Hodes. And well, hockey is officially over for the Penguins organization, as over the weekend, the Wheeling Nailers lost their second round series to the Toledo Walleye in an absolute heartbreaker in Game 4, completing the sweep for Toledo, a 3-2 overtime loss for the Nailers, and it was not for lack of trying. That said, I again have to reference Rod Brindamore last year after the Hurricanes were swept. He was clowned for saying it, but he was correct in saying that, yes, it was a 4-0 sweep, but it doesn't tell the whole story. This was a very tightly contested series between the Nailers and the Walleye, with 2 of the 4 games going to overtime. And pretty much this was a tight series, and the coin flip all 4 times went Toledo's way.
Right. I hate going towards that Rod Brindamore quote as well, but this was a very close series. I mean, 2 50-50 coin flips in overtime. Wheeling loses them both. And then even in the other 2 games that they lost, I still felt like Wheeling played fine. They just, A, didn't get the goaltending, and B, didn't get the scoring to keep up with Toledo as much. You know, in this game, in Game 4, you had the big guns show up. I mean, Hamelick had a really good game for Wheeling. Justin Adamo was really good. Jordan Martell, Justin Lee, the big guns that you want to show up, they showed up. And even Taylor Gauthier, you know, the ECHL goalie of the year, he made his playoff debut, was really good for Wheeling, but the rest of the team just wasn't fully able to help out and extend this series to Game 5 in Wheeling. it really stinks because had Gauthier been healthy for this series, I would have been curious to see if it would still be a sweep or if it would maybe be 3-1 Toledo right now. But that just goes to show how important he was for Wheeling throughout the season. And it stinks that he couldn't play until game 4 of the series. They really missed him in the first 3 games.
Yeah, that was a huge loss for the Nailers because Gauthier had been an absolute rock for them. He was a huge contributor to that team's success throughout the year. Like you said, wins the ECHL Goaltender of the Year award for having such an outstanding season. And you lose that, it's really difficult to come back from, because even more so than in the National Hockey League, you go 2 levels down into the ECHL and you lose a starting caliber goaltender, one that has not only been starter caliber, but been one of the best in the league. That really hampers your quality of goaltending at that level. So that can, as we now see with the Nailers out on a 4-0 sweep, really can sweep or switch the balance of power in a series. So that was a tough loss for them. That said, you got to figure with Gauthier still under contract for 1 year in the Penguins organization, he is going to probably make the jump next year and become one of, if not Wilkes-Barre's starter.
It's going to be close. I mean, it all depends on what happens with the main team, the Penguins, just because if they go out there and get another NHL goalie to pair with Jari, or they maybe go, trade for Jari, maybe re-sign a Delkovich, bring in another goalie, that still has Blomqvist as Wilkes-Barre's starter, and then you got to figure out the backup situation over there. But if Blomqvist does get promoted to the main team, then there is an opening there, and I could see Gauthier taking full advantage of that and becoming Wilkes-Barre's starter. It's going to be a competition if Blomqvist does come up to the NHL, and it's one that Gauthier, he'll have a pretty decent chance of winning, just because, again, you look at his stats for this year. He led the ECHL, Gauthier, that is, .923 save percentage. He had 4 shutouts. He also had a 2.23 goals against average, 24 wins. Yes, I know wins is a team stat, but I figured I would throw that in there overall. But he was tremendous against that level of competition. And if he does get the starting nod in Wilkes-Barre for next year, I think he's going to be ready for it.
For sure. And you talk about all those numbers. It continues a through line of what we've been talking about some of the younger players and prospects in the Penguins system. You put up numbers like that in the ECHL, it kind of shows as a goaltender that you're ready for the next level, that you've done everything that you can do at that level. It's kind of the same deal with Joel Blomqvist. You look at how well he played for Wilkes-Barre this year, how good he was. Maybe it's time for him to move up to the next level and take that next step in his development. And this is a process where it sucks for Wheeling fans because, like you guys know, I worked there for a few seasons. It's really tough to convey to people that, because the fans there are passionate, the fans there care, but you have to remind them that they are a developmental team. They are there to help feed Wilkes-Barre, and Wilkes-Barre is there to help feed Pittsburgh. So as much as you want to hold on to these guys who are great for you and help you win, their ultimate goal is to get to that next level. And for Gauthier, after a season like this, it's probably time for him to go to the American League.
Right. I think so at this point. And whether he gets the starting gig remains to be seen. But after that type of season, I concur with you. I really don't think he has anything, I guess, left to learn down there. It's kind of similar to how we talked about Houston last week for our episode on Friday, right, Pat? With how he played for the most part at the NHL level. There's really nothing else he needs to learn down in Wilkes-Barre. And now you can say the same for Gauthier. I know, different position, but it's probably time for him to make that leap. And whether he gets the start in Wilkes-Barre, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, for sure. And, like we said, tough loss for Wheeling. They put up great efforts in all 4 games, but between not having Gauthier until game 4, and then obviously special teams played a huge factor in this series. Wheeling was unable to kill the penalties they needed to kill, which ended up playing a huge factor in a 4-game sweep. So you hate to see it for the Nailers. We were really pulling for them to get to the 3rd round, but unfortunately their season comes to an end at the hands of the Toledo Walleye in a 4-game sweep. But that is going to do it for this second segment. When we come back, we are going to check in on all the Penguins playing at the IIHF World Championships, and quite a few of them are making quite a bit of a difference. But before we do that, we're going to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, we're back here on the Monday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And let's take a look over the pond and see how some of our boys are doing at the World Championships. And gotta say, they may not be at the top of the statistical standings, but Penguins at the World Championships are making a difference. And God, I hate talking about it because I'd rather be talking about the Stanley Cup playoffs, but we're hockey fans. We'll talk about it anyway. Let's start with one of the most polarizing Penguins on the roster, and that's Erik Karlsson. He's having a very solid tournament so far. 2 goals, 1 assist, all 3 points came in a 5-1 win over Poland, and he looked like Erik Karlsson again.
One of the goals really stood out to me, and it was when Victor Hedman was basically going 1-on-3 against 3 Poland players, and he dishes it to Karlsson, who fires a one-timer in the back of the net. And you know where that came on? The power play.
Yeah, so I guess the fix for the Penguins power play is larger ice, international sized ice. Victor Hedman, who, I think he's pretty easy to get, right? It shouldn't be hard to find him on the trade market. I don't think they have to really give anything up for that. Oh, and you have to play the Polish national team pretty much as many games as you can. And I think they're ready for NHL promotion, right?
Yeah, I totally. And I think we can just maybe have one of the Penguin players go 1-on-3 every time on the power play, whether it's Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, or Chris Letang, and then dish it to Karlsson along the half wall, and then he can just fire a one-timer. That's easy, right? Even if it's against Igor Shesterkin, Andrei Vasilevsky, whatever. But no, in all seriousness, that was a really nice shot by Karlsson, and I do want to see more of that on the Penguins for next season. Michael Bunting has also been great the World Championship so far. Did you see the goal that he scored, by the way? That is probably the furthest out I've ever seen him score a goal for as long as I've been watching him. It came from, looked like 30, 35 feet out, and that's a goal that cannot go in, by the way. It was
I will say, though, I didn't see which Canadian player it was in front, but it was a good net front battle between the Great Britain defenseman and the Canadian player, because yeah, that's a goal that can't go in, but there was definitely some vision obstruction there on Bunting's goal. So he saw an opportunity with a net front scramble to get the puck at the net and score a goal. So kudos to him for recognizing that. The other thing is he has a couple assists at the World Championships, all of which have come on goals scored by Connor Bedard. So we have to ask the question, does Connor Bedard want to come to the Pittsburgh Penguins and play with Michael Bunting? We have to ask the question.
Hey, man, I mean, here's my column on that, right? I mean, we can just trade the whole farm system and just everyone on the team to get Connor Bedard, right? But no, that would be obviously be hilarious, but no, that's not going to happen. But it's nice seeing him and Bedard play really well together. Apologies about my dog barking downstairs for some reason. I guess he's just excited about it, but yeah, he's been great. And then finally, Pat, Puljujarvi, did you see the deflection that he had on that goal? That's something I really want to see him work on for next season, getting to the net a bit more, working on those deflections, because I think he can become a really sound player for the Penguins, just in a bit of a better way, I think, for next year. That was a really nice deflection by him.
Yeah, and I definitely want to see more of that from him. We talked about it on the show before. Him playing that kind of straightforward, in-your-face, crash and bang kind of game, get to the front of the net, similar to Michael Bunting. We would like to see that kind of game from him. And to add one more thing on Michael Bunting, it again shows what we've been saying about him, that he has the ability to play with top end talent. And that's the kind of guy that the Penguins need, a more affordable kind of honest, straightforward player who meshes well with one of Malkin or Crosby. And one last thing on Penguins at the World Championships, not the best of news. As we record this around 11 a.m. on Monday morning, the U.S. is playing Slovakia right now, and they are trailing 2-0. And in net for Team USA, unfortunately, is Alex Nedeljkovic.
Poor Ned, man. I mean, yeah, they're down 2-0 at the end of the first period. That's right now at about 11 a.m. of recording, as Pat said. So hopefully Team USA can get it back, but definitely not the best first period for Ned overall starting in this game. And, real quickly for the Stanley Cup playoffs, great to see Carolina still fighting against the Rangers, though I still think that series is probably over. I think we're going for a Panthers-Rangers Eastern Conference final. I know the Rangers are giving off Team of Destiny vibes, but I'm still going to take the Panthers, I think, to win that series if we get it, just because I think when the Panthers are humming, I don't think there's a team in the East that can beat them 4 out of 7 times. And then the Vancouver Canucks, they get outshot 44-18, but Arthur Shelovs makes 41 saves and is able to stop the Oilers. The Canucks go up 2-1. That was an awesome game to watch. And then Dallas, Colorado, once again, just an incredible Game 3. This is very much Alabama, Georgia in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I am having a blast watching that series. 4 really fun series so far. I mean, the Rangers-Hurricanes one isn't, I guess, as fun as some of the others, but these are still better, I think, compared to the first round.
Yeah, Carolina will fight to stay alive tonight against the New York Rangers at 7 o'clock. I would love to see them extend that series for no other reason. Well, obviously, we want them to make the Stanley Cup final so we can get the first round pick, but I'd take that. But I digress. But I would like to see the Rangers have to get a little bit more of a chunk taken out of them before they go on and more than likely take on the Florida Panthers. So we will see. But that is going to do it for us on the Monday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Hunter and I will be back on Tuesday to do some more season in reviews. We'll also do a little bit more of a recap of the Penguins at the World Championships and whatever else the news gods bring our way. But for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Dam. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we will be back on Tuesday.